All right. Hey, friends, welcome. This is our parenting webinar on parenting an intense child. It's always really exciting for me to see so many people in the room. We had a few hundred parents and educators and clinicians register for this call. And I think we can all get on the same page pretty quickly when we're talking about parenting an intense kid. And so if this is your first time meeting me here today, let me take you back to 2004 when I had first graduated with my master's degree in communication disorders. I'm standing in the hallway with my hand on the door to a third grade classroom, and I'm filled with dread because it is my weekly obligation to get Charlie. Now, Charlie was 9 years old. I was a speech language pathologist at an autism school at the time, so almost 20 years ago. And the bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, just got out of college, excited to use my gifts, part of my personality, was nowhere to be found. I was filled with dread. I remember using all of my tools and powers of persuasion to transition 9-year-old Charlie out of the classroom and down the hallway without a meltdown. And as we're 15 steps away from my speech therapy office, where we're going to work on communication and making friends and social skills, my hope is building. And then I'm getting closer. 14, 13, 12, 11, 10 steps away, and it happens. Charlie has a screaming meltdown. He drops to the floor at my feet. As if that's not hard enough, I remember as a new grad looking over my shoulder and seeing the teachers peering out of the cafeteria and only picture them wondering, like, or judging rather, like, what is Samantha going to do in this situation? And I'm no longer embarrassed to say that in that moment, when I felt the sweat drip down my back and was at a loss for what to do, I just bribed Charlie and I skipped the lesson and I brought him back to the classroom. But I still had to make that walk of shame down the long hallway to my speech therapy office. And when I did, I closed the door, turned the light off, put my head in my hands, and I wrestled. I wrestled with, maybe I chose the wrong job. I am not cut out for this. Why does everybody talk about the gifts of making a difference? And then, like, nobody actually talks about meltdowns. And what was I supposed to do in that moment? Was I supposed to sit with him and like acknowledge his feelings? Was I supposed to like be more firm and guide him through that situation? I know that the social worker was talking about using the breathing ball. Would that have worked in this scenario? And as I like kind of wrestled with that self-doubt and feeling lost about what to do, thank goodness I heard my mom Cheryl's voice in my head. Now, Cheryl raised us 5 kids in my family, plus 5 daycare kids here in Minnesota, where I'm based out of St. Paul right now. And Cheryl's voice said, Samantha, every child has gifts and you can learn how to draw them out. Every child has gifts. And that became a guiding star for me. It tapped into a resourcefulness that I didn't know I had. First of all, I didn't know I was going to need it. So if you're on this class with me today because you can relate to any of these feelings or this scenario with a child screaming those things that you never want to hear them scream, whether it's in your private setting or in public, you're in the right place. What I have created for us today as a class is 3 points that I'm hoping you can walk away with so that it's really impactful and practical. One of the things I want you to understand is what's happening beneath challenging behaviors. I want to provide shine a spotlight on what is it that we do wrong as the parent in the situation, as the professional in the situation, as the adult or caregiver. And then I want to talk about like, why do we react the way that we do and how can we change things quite quickly so our situation can become much, much better. So while I give you a little bit of my bio so that you know that I've been working with families that have intense kids for almost 20 years, equally important is that I'm a mother of a 3-year-old. So it was my late 30s before we were able to have our own child. And so he is a very strong-willed nature. And so these these tools you're going to learn today aren't just theoretical. They're really based on practicality so that you feel empowered. And I'm hoping it's going to connect the dots for you so that you can create more peace at home. So if you're ready, I'm really interactive. I've certified over 60 professionals and parent coaches. I'm hired nationally in North America to teach on a curriculum that I've created, the Mad to Glad Blueprint, these 8 pillars of parenting to create more peace at home. So if you'll type in the chat box, why are you here? Why are you here on a Friday in the afternoon? And some friends are listening to the replay because I know there were a lot of folks who registered. You could share a wish. You could share a challenge. Anything else that's on your heart or your mind as to why you're here. And we'll see what we can do to address some of these situations. Because in parenting, we don't really have time to waste. We can't just show up and have theory taught to us. So let's make it really practical. All right. A son who freaks out when told no. Oh, we're going to address that exactly today, Jen. Parents of a strong-willed child and struggling. Got you, Kelsey. Foster parenting. I'm familiar. Also, the word no, strong-willed 3-year-old, foster parent. Okay, so I'm seeing some overlap here. And so an intense 7-year-old with anxiety and ASD. And you're a clinical social worker. Welcome, Kathleen. I spoke to the social workers. Are you in Minnesota here? Oh, great. Okay, I was at the social worker conference earlier this week on Tuesday. All right, so we've got new skills to address listening challenges. Brenna, I see you, a 3-year-old who wrestles all the time, strong-willed, her way or the highway. Oh, wow, we are in for it, friends. We are going to get to it. Thank you, Lisa. You love my courses and continuing to learn. Special ed teacher, EBD, strong feelings, defiance. Another clinical social worker. Yeah, I see you, Kelsey. Hi. And a favorite spirited 6-year-old. Wrestle with how to keep the spirit. Jason, your wife is strong-willed. We're going to talk about that too. Where do these kids get it? No, I'm partially teasing. And keep her passion, but need her to understand listening. Exactly. Okay. All right. Australia's in the house. Thank you. All right. A lot of no's in this room. So for those of you who messaged me privately with your challenges, thank you for expressing that. And if you need to dash off early, I understand. The replay will be sent. So, I get kind of excited when I'm teaching this material and I forget to say some things that are really important. Like, when I was in that moment with Charlie, feeling like I was hitting a wall and feeling like I had all of this knowledge. And I mean, honestly, I thought, well, I should know better than the average person in this situation. Like I do have 6 years of education in it and this specific specialty. And yet, what I realized was I needed to do more research to really get to the root of why are kids melting down. And what I started looking at was what was coming out in the brain science 20 years ago. Dr. Daniel Siegel was an influential resource for me. He wrote the book, The Whole Brain Child, and so many other things. Neurobehavioral model. I see that, Debbie. Thank you very much. I started researching like what are play therapists doing and what works and what doesn't, what's happening with the occupational therapists and what does sensory integration in the nervous system mean? And when I was looking at all of these fields of study, I started seeing a pattern that renewed my inspiration, that made me not want to give up. And that's not always the case when we're reading books about kids and behavior, right? It's like, I'm kind of excited, but how do I put this actually into play? So I want to share with you the foundational understanding of what all of these fields were saying. And they were basically saying, if your child's brain doesn't feel calm or safe, so why it doesn't feel calm or safe, not relevant for this moment. But if a child's brain does not feel calm and it does not feel safe, you're going to have meltdowns and poor communication, and it's going to be really hard to get through to them. So what exactly do we do with this information? Well, I'm going to break this down for all of us here, and I'll use a slideshow to help those of us who are visual learners. So if you have been to my website, you've seen the 8 pillars I've created for creating more peace at home. And I want you to understand exactly what's happening in the brain so that we can understand this. So Dr. Daniel Siegel, this neuroscientist based out of UCLA, who merged the brain science with child development, talks about the brain being like split into the upstairs and the downstairs. So the downstairs brain is responsible for the fight, flight, or freeze response. And it's always hit or miss as to what we know about this. Sometimes we hear about it. So go ahead and type in the chat box what you might know or what you've heard about this response. It's interesting as parents because we'll get education from some of the specialists we're working with, but then like, what does that really mean when a child is yelling and melting down? Like what exactly do we do with that information? So I want to do a temperature check and hear what you know about fight, flight, or freeze. And as you're typing that right now, I will comment that it is an early developing part of the brain. It's right down here at the brainstem. It's primitive. When this part of the brain is activated, adrenaline and cortisol flood the brain. So these are stress chemicals. And we want to know this as we start adding in layers of information, to this reptile brain. Kathleen, of course, you've got that, with the upstairs brain. So the upstairs brain, feel free to write what you might know about this. Dawn's already on it, the frontal brain. And talking about flip your lid. The upstairs brain is responsible for problem solving and paying attention and managing behaviors. So if you think about what do we like as parents, we get pretty clear quickly that we like upstairs brain skills. But the reason that I'm bringing this information to you today is because in the moment when a child is screaming and you're either sweating or I grew up in a family that had some anger in the household. So I remember for the first time, like, what is happening inside of me? Rage is boiling through my veins. Like, you want to know this information because it's going to influence the old pattern of your upbringing and give you some new insight into how you might respond to better navigate this situation with a child. So when the downstairs brain is activated, it's primitive. It's, I'm in the Midwest, so we've got black bears here. If a black bear was chasing me in the North Woods, I would fight him. I would flee and run away, or I would freeze and play dead. This is a survival mechanism. This is on separate parts of the brain. So we've got downstairs and we've got upstairs. So when a child has challenging behavior, I like to say that adrenaline and cortisol creates a fire in the brain. Many of us know the terms like, oh, my child's dysregulated and you need to work on social and emotional skills and, some of those things. But really, what I like about fire is that it begins helping us understand that if there's a fire in the brain, our first goal is to put it out. So how do we, and because we're the adults in the situation, it's also becoming aware of how do I add fuel to this fire? So when we talk about fire in the brain, a lot of the things that you wrote in the chat box about, and it doesn't matter if you're kids, I saw some of you have 18-year-olds, young adults, maybe not even young adult children. Some of you do have the young preschoolers like I have in my household right now. But ultimately, you have a child with this fire in the brain and this more intense wiring. When you see these behavioral symptoms is what I'll call them. Your child wants to rule the roost. So they're controlling and they're demanding. You feel yourself walking on eggshells, like the mood of the household revolves around them. We know that the triggers can be confusing. So these can be, some kids who have more fire in the brain are sensory seeking or highly reactive or even sensory avoidant because the lights and the sounds and the toilet flushing can really bother their nervous system and their sensory system. But beyond that, they can be confusing triggers like you ate the last banana for breakfast, even though they never eat a banana. And then they're flipping out, they're flipping their lid. And there's a lot of drama in the household. So there are things that you can't anticipate and you feel like you're trying to like predict things and walk 3 steps ahead of your kid. We also know that you're raising a child with more brain intensity or fire in the brain because their reaction is too high for the low significance of the situation. And then you also know that if you match this child with intensity, if you go into default parenting, like in the way I was raised, very authoritarian, parents were like, one parent was like, you will obey me. They were not flexible to the various learning needs, behavior needs, sensitive, emotional needs of the children because they were the boss. And so if you parent your child this way, either from childhood patterning or desperation, like I got to do something, like it's my job to teach them, what happens is their fire worsens, their intensity worsens. So you get these little beings or big beings, if you have big children, who become astonishingly powerful when they're upset. And you see their stubborn side come out, you see the defiance come out. A lot of families who work with me for parent coaching see aggressive behavior come out. So we want to understand if we're raising an intense brain child, because that influences our parenting. And if you're somebody thinking, but like, isn't this normal so far? Aren't all kids wired this way? Well, if you have a child that has more of a harmonious or pleasing temperament, you would know that not all kids are wired this way. And I share that because what I see with parents, I think we get a bad rap. I think there's a lot of criticism. There's a lot of judgment if our kid acts out in public. We might go to bed feeling guilty because we're like, how should I have handled that situation differently when my child was lashing out and hitting? But really, the kids who have more intensity are the ones responding this way. A child who has more of a pleaser personality will try not to ruffle feathers. They're more conflict avoidant. They don't want to try rule the roost. They want everybody to get along and for things to feel peaceful at home. So when we talk about the intense brain child, we also want to consider if there's an intense brain adult in your household. Now, this isn't to blame. It's just to acknowledge like, oh yeah, so I could have fire in the brain too. And this becomes very important as we layer in practical tools on what we can actually do. Thank you for your comment, Kathleen, about different children and their personalities in your household. So when your child has fire in the brain, remember how I said earlier, the brain needs two things in order to have self-control instead of melting down. It needs to feel calm and it needs to feel safe. What happens with intense brain kids is I like to talk about the little scientist in the brain. So just like a scientist, we think about who hypothesizes and tests to see if their hypotheses are true. The little scientist in the brain is testing boundaries and pushing limits to see if they'll win. It's like a gambler with a hand on the slot machine. Will I win this time? How about this time? What if I do this? Now will I win? But the thing that your child is trying to win, even though it looks like they're just trying to get their way, right? I hear very frequently, my child will do things, oh, somebody wrote this in the chat box, as long as it's her way. The thing that the child's brain is trying to win is it's trying to win an energy match. So the baseline of intensity of adrenaline and cortisol that's coursing through them, the baseline is higher level stress. So you might find that if you're practicing certain parenting strategies and you're like, well, it only works to a certain point, that can be because it's not just about refraining from adding fuel to the fire. It's about layering in other pieces because the scientist is still trying to win an energy match. So we get into this cycle of like escalation, or this downward spiral is what it feels like emotionally in our relationships with kids. So what are they trying to win? Well, I already talked about the energy match, and I want to bring to the table for those of, for us as adults, it's kind of like if you've ever stayed in a job too long just because it was familiar, or a relationship. So the scientist in the brain is continuing to escalate, even if later you sit down next to each other and there's tears and there's remorse and there's promises like, I'll do it better next time, I won't throw that shoe. Why does it happen again? Because the fire in the brain is a neural pathway that's become deeply ingrained. And so we want to understand, how do we fade that pathway and step on a new path? So the thing that the scientist is testing for are things like affection and positive excitement and affect, rather than the drama and the negativity and that disruption in the relationship. And there's a key component here that we want to understand with the brain as well, which is called mirror neurons. Now, this is an interesting term that not a lot of people know about, but really relevant when we're talking about kids and how do we shift and support behavior. Mirror neurons reflect the state another person is in, like a mirror. And this has two implications. The first implication is that when you're advised on strategies like stay calm in that moment when you're losing it. Like when I'm advised to stay calm when Charlie is kicking and flailing at my feet, even though it doesn't feel like it's making a difference in the moment, the point of it is so that his mirror neurons pick up on a body that's calm and regulated. Now, intense brain kids need a lot of repetition, like thousands and years worth of repetition in order to get there. Not to mention, if your child's very high intensity, they might need body work like sensory-based OT, occupational therapy, or a neurological chiropractic from a pediatric practitioner. Like those things can help from the body's internal communication system. But we want to mirror for our kids how to be in self-control. And I know, I can already hear you in my head. I'm calm until, I know. I'm not going to stop here. Don't worry. We're going to layer in more pieces. But it also means that our mirror neurons are triggered. So when the child is yelling, I'm going to get triggered in my fight, flight, or freeze response as well. And so some of us have, like I said earlier, most of us haven't been chased by a bear, so we can't really relate to that. But when we're thinking about a conflict situation with our kid, do you have more fight response? Do you have more flee response? Like, I just got to get out of here. This is how I feel at dinner time struggle sometimes. Like, I got to get out of here. Otherwise, I'm going to feed you. I know you're practicing feeding yourself. Or do you have more freeze response where you're just like, I don't know what to do here. I'm overwhelmed. I'm spinning. I feel stuck. Nothing works. And then we feel really defeated. So mirror neurons are an important part of our brains for us to understand. And I remember a dad who I worked with early on in parent coaching. So I left my field of speech therapy a dozen years ago because I'm what's the word? Pushed, called, propelled by a question that's regularly in my mind, which is like, what am I missing? So when I found some of these tools to prevent meltdowns for kids with a diagnosis that was known for having really challenging behaviors and meltdowns, I thought, well, what am I missing for parents though? Because I wasn't a parent yet. And at this point, I also work in the schools and even mental health practices, and what's missing as professionals so that we can communicate with parents in a way where this information sinks in, because as parents, we're already going to all of these specialists looking for answers. So I remember a dad saying, I was never an angry person, but I understand now why I'm an angry dad. So if that's you, you're in the right place. I hope I'm taking good care of your heart as you're getting some education at the same time. So I want you to consider, what does fire look like in your family? And the catch is this. I want you to write in the chat box. I want you to write what fire looks like in your kid. I do. And I want you to write what fire looks like in the adults in your family. And, you don't have to be too harsh on yourself, but, do you identify as a yeller? Does your fire look like slamming a door, disconnecting, freezing up? I won't read your names out loud when I see it. Okay, I see yelling. Disconnect and walk away. Shouting. I see you, the dad. Yeah, so there's a lot of screaming and yelling. I used to have a presentation 10 years ago, how to stop the fighting, yelling, and frustration. Yeah, yelling the kid's name. Are you listening? Trying to get their attention. Yeah, yelling and throwing, so kids can become afraid of those reactions, right? Yeah, and so we know that we have our own childhood crap to unpack. I get it. So when we get really clear about this, like, why am I even taking you through this? Are I supposed to give you tools to make it better? Well, this is the beauty of the field of parent coaching and life coaching, is that it's a culture of growth and self-compassion where there's no judgment. Because when we know where we are now, it gives us the ability to move forward without holding guilt and shame and just some of that weight that keeps us up at night. So the predictable responses to high intensity parenting is that it creates fear in a child. And maybe not even high intensity. This could be like, nope, go to your room, shut the door. So it feels intense to them, or it can feel like abandonment if we shut them away because we don't know exactly what to do. With intense kids, it triggers retaliation. So these kiddos have a strong retaliation response. And I mean, all of you will understand when I talk about my 3-year-old we're doing some construction in our condo right now, and he'll go and he'll bump his toe on something, and then he'll yell at that thing and try to hit me. And I'm like, okay, you stubbed your toe. But, when there's high emotion in the room, it triggers retaliation response from these emotionally intense kids. And we also know that the results are temporary. If our yelling or our shouting their name or like trying to get them to listen, like, hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. If those really worked, some of those are upstairs brain skills, then you wouldn't be attending this class. So I think most of us can agree, like, even though part of us says, but yelling is the only thing that works, we also realize emotionally it doesn't really work. It's not really creating the dynamic that we're looking for peace at home. Right. And Nur to comment on shutting down counts as well. And negative comments. Yeah. So we can get stuck in put downs or shaming or blaming children in return. So what is our starting point? Well, our starting point, because I promised that I was going to talk about what's happening in the brain, and like now we want to know, how do we calm fire in the brain? I teach this mantra in my parent coaching course, and it looks really simple, friends. It is called the Calm Mantra. But what it does is it begins giving us an exit from perpetuating these neural pathways of matching fire with fire, which create more adrenaline and cortisol, which deepens more of the pathway. Now, over time, it looks like our kids have a personality of defiance and manipulation and aggression. But if we're matching fire with fire, we're deepening that pathway for them, because adrenaline goes up and baseline, hit it again. So what we want to do is we want to go the other direction, and we want to say, okay, well, I can't control my child, but I can influence their brain chemistry, and I can influence my own. So the mantra is calm body, calm voice, calm face. So for those of you who are not yellers, I'll share the story. A mom was said, I'm not a yeller. I don't know why my kid doesn't listen. I'm really nice. And she was really nice. But I said, well, so tell me about this tension point where it's time for your kid to turn off their game and come eat dinner. How do you get your child to listen? And she said, I tell him, turn off your game right now and come eat dinner. And her teeth were clenched and her fists were clenched by her side, and you feel the edge in the voice. And because transitions with her intense kid were hard, she would approach the situation geared up and ready for a fight. But that gives these mirror neurons not like open and soft and warm, but it gives like alert. And a lot of intense kids have externalized behavior. So they're alerting to be externalized and to come at you. Okay. So point there. If you have a question, you are welcome to ask it in the chat box. And what I'm going to do next is I want you to get an experience of what fire in the brain feels like. Because if you're here in my community, it means you're also compassionate for your kid and you love them and you want to make things better. So this will be a good experiment. So if we're looking to answer the question, what is up with my kid's behavior? I want to take you through a fiery brain experiment. So what I'm going to do is invite you to close your eyes as you listen to my voice and notice what it feels like in your body. It's a 30-second experiment, so hang in there with me. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, look down, make your world a little bit smaller. Okay, and notice what it feels like in your body. No. Stop that. Knock it off. Oh, every day. No. I said no. Don't do no. Open your eyes. Starting phrases with no triggers fire in the brain. And when I do this experiment where, I'm saying that for 30 seconds, there's 4 common reactions that we as humans have to this experiment, even though nobody's in trouble. So type in the chat box what you noticed in your body. And Debbie has done this before. Debbie, I will be curious if you had the same reaction when you were in your other training or a different one. Feel free to type it. Hands started to tingle. Yeah, I see you like, oh, yep. Anxiety. Laura, how did you know you had anxiety? What was, tell me, give me more. Jody felt heart tightening. Yeah, tightening up, heart pushed in, tingling in your body, chest tightening. Yeah, so there's those of you who are typing quickly and responding first are sharing that one of the 4 common responses is that there's tension in the body. And if we think about kids who have a hard time listening and they're spirited and strong-willed and might have some sensory stuff going on, or they're impulsive and they might have ADHD, what happens is because they have a hard time listening, we tend to overcorrect them and direct them throughout the whole day. So they're hearing no, or they're hearing their name. So for those of you social workers who might have seen me speak on Tuesday, I was sharing the example where with my kid being like, mom, 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 hey, mom, mom, mom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, stop saying my name. We have to remember, we don't have to, but I invite you to remember that with our kids as well. If they're high energy, impulsive, distractible, there's a good chance that they're hearing no, their name, correction throughout the day. This could be at school. This could also be at home. And there's good reason why we say no. A study said that toddlers are told no every 9 minutes. And like, I get it, right? I can see it, my kiddo trying to climb on the table and, there's a crack over here and there's an outlet over there and pounding on the window is fun and making noise, but people are sleeping at 6:30 in the morning while you are high energy, seems fun to you, right? Like there's a lot of reasons why we say no to kids. And those are all innocent ones. What about the ones where our kid has poor self-control and challenging behaviors and they're hitting their sibling or they're throwing stuff or they're hurting? Our kids tend to get a lot of that direction all day long. And even though in the moment we might need to say no at times, what's really important to learn as parents is that starting phrases with no fuels the fire. You all felt it. And it can either create tension. And some kids will say, I can't go to school, my tummy hurts. And you take them to the doctor or chiropractor and you're like, nothing wrong, kid's a hypochondriac, they're just trying to get out of it. Like, or for those of you who had chest tightening, tummy butterflies, or like, do you get headaches if you're really stressed out? Could that be happening with our kids? I'm married to a pediatric chiropractor. So if this seems like a weird conversation to you, that's where it comes from. I see him doing some body work with families a lot where they start calming some of those stress responses in the body. I like to say that chiropractic's kind of like the inside out. You work on the body, help it relax, communicate well, and then behaviors change outside. And parent coaching is more like the outside in, like let's give you tools for the environment you create so you're not creating this stress loop. Okay, so chest tightening, butterflies, that's only one response. So let me show you a slide so that I can stay on track and show you all 4. Starting phrases with no will create tension. It can create sadness. I call it the wilting response. So if you have more of a pleasing personality and you want to harmonize the room and have people get along, we see the sad or wilting response where we internalize it. And I've seen kids as young as 4 who come home and the parent says like, well, why'd you get the bad color on the behavior chart? And they'll say, I'm just a bad kid. So we see kids internalizing stress. Resistance is an obvious one. So I didn't see that in the chat box. Comment in the chat box if any of you had resistance. Maybe that's not like the fun thing to comment, but I feel like this is for people who aren't afraid of conflict. They're like, oh, don't tell me what to do. Capital R from you, Jason. Got it. And then the tuning out response. And this one's a little bit harder to track sometimes, but we think about the teenager who tunes us out and they've got their earphones on, or the kid in the backseat, maybe with headphones on. But it's also true for little kids. When my nephews were 3 years old, we'd say, come and eat dinner. And Henry would come running and Asa would just be like coloring. I'm like, Asa, and I touch his shoulder, time to eat. Your brother's waiting. Food's getting cold. And he'd just be like, and look like seemingly in his own world. And so tuning out can be like a protective response from a lot of stress in the environment and can be more free. It's like, nope, just keep everything else out of here because this is my comfort zone right here. All right. So we've got calm, we've got the understanding that there are ways that we add fuel to the fire. And I think what I've done here for parents is if you are appreciating this information, I have a free handout on, I call it the parenting guide on how to make it better. What we've done today so far is we've talked about the first 2 pillars from the Mad to Glad blueprint, just the surface of it, because, it's an 8-week series. So spend about 10-15 minutes on the first 2 each. And if you want to understand what are the remaining 6 pillars, this free PDF is something you can get from my website. You'll need to use your QR code though, because I don't have a link readily handy, although I can pull that in a moment here. But for those of you who aren't familiar with QR codes, you just take your camera, you hold it up, you scan the code, and then it'll have a little website on here on your phone. So you click on that and then it will take you there and it can email it right to you. So you'll have that quickly. And then for others of you, as you're listening to this and you're like, oh yeah, maybe there's something I can do differently, or we're spending a lot of energy every day managing meltdowns, or we have a place where we take our kid, but where's the place for us parents to learn some of these tools? That's the whole point of parent coaching. So if you're feeling like you're getting tools, that's my goal. Here's a way to get free tools. And if you feel like you wanted more information, I'll save some time towards the end of class today to talk about my parent cohort that's coming up. It's an 8-week series that I lead live, and I take you through customization of each pillar so that you can apply it for your unique family, whether you have the kid that's 6 or the kid that's 18 on the autism spectrum or something else. You can hear how there's really commonalities when you're raising an intense kid. If you decide to stick around for that, I know some of you private messaged me and said you need to duck off early. Not only will I email that to you, but I'm going to share this right here, and not to like pitch it to you, but just so you have it. If you decide you come back to this replay later and you want to listen, I have opened up, I have a coupon code that saves you $100. This is wrong. It's not 10%, it's $100. And the code is October 13th. If you go to my website, since it's Friday the 13th and you all showed up for this webinar or the replay. So I opened up my program so that the first 10 people who sign up can save $100. And that's through samanthamo.com/parent. So if you decide you want to explore this later, that is available to you, and 10 of those spots are open. So as we continue moving forward here, and you know what, let me grab that link since we are online, and that's the benefit is I can just grab it quickly for the worksheet. I'm going to share the URL because we just recently made it, so it's not directly from my website. Okay, I found it. I'm going to put this in the chat box. Here we go. If you wanted to download that, since you're on a computer, sometimes that's easier. samanthamo.com/how-to-make-it-better. All right, so moving forward, let me do a check-in with you. What's ringing true for what you all are hearing so far? You can type in what's ringing true. You're also welcome to type what becomes your next question. So when you hear this information, what's the next thing on your mind? What are you thinking that you want me to answer? Because I've got space to be flexible here. Oh yeah, that's good. Kelsey, I bet a lot of people are wondering that. So when can you tell kids no? I'll show you. So we can tell our kids no. I think that that's a mistake when there's black and white, like never tell your kids no. And I think that's a mistake. But if there's a lot of stress at home, this is a really valuable time to practice shifting your own behavior and noticing what happens. So instead of don't climb on the table, you tell your kid what to do. You can climb on the swing set. You can climb on your bed. You can go outside and climb. I save the word no for this part of the pyramid. So what you're learning here today are these bottom level, how do you calm fire in the brain, which is why they're blue. And then we want to work on like some different emotional skills on how to help kids feel safe and seen and heard, because that shifts their behavior as well from a relationship and attachment science perspective. So positive discipline is where I bring in the word no. So I'm a really big fan of coming up with family rules that start with the word no, so that we save our no's for the felonies and not the misdemeanors. Now, as you can imagine, like that's a big behavior change where you have to, it feels really intentional at first, like, oh, wait. So let when you say no be your reminder, like the rubber band that you might snap on your wrist, like, oh, I said no cookie. So instead, you're like, okay, I said no. What can you do? You can eat carrots, or, or you can eat your supper first and then have the cookie. And what's going to happen is kids are still going to be unhappy that we're not giving them the cookie, but that's where these orange like relationship strategies come in of how do we let kids have their feelings so that the pressure valve releases and they're seen and heard, like, yep, you're really upset. And we had talked about this at the social worker conference earlier, and we're going to move into it now. We reserve our no's for the behaviors we want to change, the felonies, the no hurting, the no yelling, the no swearing, or whatever it is in your family. And I take people through a process where we come up with no more than 4 family rules. And the rules apply to everybody. So know that that's true too, because that's important for mirror neurons. Okay, let me check the chat box to see what people are wondering. Thank you, Lisa. I'm glad it's useful. So even if you try to stay calm, physically and with your voice, they are used to the fire reaction. I'm not sure what play up means, Sheena, but I can still comment on this. Whether this is what you're meaning or not, feel free to type more. So when you stay calm, yeah, you're right. Your kid is used to the fire reaction. That's a baseline. That's the gambler on the ham machine, the slot machine. Like, will I win this time? That's me having my coffee at 8:30 in the morning, and then it wearing out so that I have it again at 11:30, and then it wears out after lunchtime. And so then I have two, like, the shot of espresso and the shot of espresso and the shot of espresso, because I'm used to that high baseline of energy. That is the process where we get stuck with kids with challenging behavior and matching fire with fire. So when you try stay calm, you are going to see them trying to rev you up and engage you in drama. That is true. So we also look for how to give them positive, high intensity. So these are, I was talking to a teacher recently, and she said, oh yeah, so my colleague's amazing at being calm, and there's a really hard kiddo in the school, and the teacher's doing a really great job being calm. But for some reason, like, the kiddo's really acting up a lot with her. And I said, well, what does she do to help the kid feel like a rock star? And she's like, well, no, she's like really calm, and she's really grounded, and she's working on that with him, and like just staying really stable. And I said, yeah, but these high intensity kids, if once you start lowering fire in the brain and you take away that intensity, what you need to do is you need to trigger more of the dopamine and oxytocin and happy chemicals. So it's like, high five, great job, big bear hug, if your kid can tolerate that from a sensory perspective. So yeah, you stay calm. And, most families need a combination of 4 or 5 of these tools in order for it to work. But I know in a live class event setting like this, starting with calm can be a game changer. Great. Kathleen, I'm glad that having it described as fire is helpful. Good. Great. Aha. Right. Sheena, I get you. Yep. So the tantrum or defiance. Yep, they will. So it's not enough tools, but it's a starting point. And Sonia, would I explain that I'm changing strategies for an 18-year-old? I believe you said your kiddo has ASD. So yeah, I'd probably clear that up with them. I'd probably say something like, yep, I'm practicing not yelling. Oh, I'm feeling upset here, and I'm practicing not yelling. You're welcome. Okay, so we have time. Let me see. We have time for one more tool. Let me see if I want to do this one, since I said I would give you 3. Okay, so I want to share with you maybe another fire starter, but it's also in this orange relationship category that's very important for helping kids feel attachment and safe and connected to us. It's emotion coaching. So in order to teach that, I want to come back to brain science. So Dr. Daniel Siegel really clearly defined downstairs brain and upstairs brain functioning. And then he also clarified the 2 hemispheres. We've got the right side and the left side. The right side is responsible for emotion, and the left side is responsible for logic and language. Now, where kids are stuck when they're having a big emotional reaction is they're stuck in the right brain. And we as adults often try to fix the situation. So we say things like, if you could just put your coat on and get out the door, we are going to do something fun. It's going to be really enjoyable. Or we try to sugarcoat it. A dad was telling me from Canada, his kid tried out for the hockey team and made it in like the D League or something. And the kid was really disappointed. And the dad was like, that's okay. I'm still going to be your coach. It's still going to feel really fun. I said, where your child is stuck, there is a door between you and your child when they're stuck in a big feeling. And so to open the door, we don't want to sugarcoat it, encourage them, use a logical teaching moment. In that moment, what we want to do is we want to recognize that they are stuck in the right brain and we want to cross the bridge. And sometimes we're confused about, like, my kid has really good reasoning sometimes, not in the moment, a fire, obviously, or a big emotion. And one of the reasons for that is because of how old we are when these right and left brain hemispheres are actually integrated. So type in the chat box. I know some of you are social workers, so you've studied this. And for some of your parents, give it a guess. How old do you think we are as humans when our brains are fully integrated? Nice. Okay. See some 25s to 30 to 27 to 28. Yeah, late 20. Women 21, guys 35. Carrie 30. Yeah. So sometimes I do a parenting class, and for those of you parents who this might catch you off guard, what you're hearing in the chat box is true. So even though your 11-year-old can ride their bike on their own to their friend's house, even though they can do homework assignments and learn history and regurgitate math facts and like do things that are upstairs brain skills and solve problems and reason, like they have access to left brain. That starts after the age of 3, but it's not integrated until mid to late 20s or 30. And so that means in this moment when we're trying to protect the relationship with our kid and connect with them, it's us getting good and coming back to where they're at developmentally. So there's and I'll just share this this image here. So you can see that we've got kids who have more fire and they're operating from their downstairs in their right brain. And if we're thinking parenting is not fun, how are we going to make this easier? This recognition of us as adults operating more in left brain and upstairs brain becomes essential. And then developing tools and then putting the tools into practice so we have new habits is really what, I've worked with 1,000 families in the last 12 years. And if you go to my Google reviews from Mad to Glad, you'll see that people are talking about like peace and calm and like feeling like they have tools that work for their kids and enjoying parenting. And in my mind, that's my goal with sharing this information with you as well. So to really let this sink in, let me look at timing. I will. Okay. No, I won't. Sorry. Okay. There's a cool video on YouTube called Not the Nail, and it shows a woman who is complaining about headaches, and the husband's like, well, there's a nail in your head. And she's like, it's not about the nail. And they go through this process where she's like, I just need you to listen. So finally in the video, he says, okay, I can tell that's really hard. And she's like, you get it, you're listening. And it's just a funny way of demonstrating different communication styles, that when we are having an emotional experience as humans, like we want somebody to listen and acknowledge that, even if the truth is like, you really know what's causing the problem for them. So remember that when we're kids and, when we're adults and we're talking to our kids. All right. So I already mentioned why I'm here today, to give you some tools. And I have found over the years that one of the things that gets in the way for us as parents, and why I love teaching the 8 pillars of parenting, is that it's not lack of trying. Like, that's not the cause for us having hard times with our kids. I think sometimes it's the way our kids are wired. Sometimes it's our own parenting habits and our own stubbornness of like, well, this is how I was raised, so it should work for my kid, which is called authoritarian, like not being flexible to recognize their needs or their sensitivities. It can also be because you've listened to a model that had a really good idea. There was a mom, Lacey, who went through my program earlier this year. She has a 5 and a 3-year-old. And she's like, I have been working for years on like leading with empathy when I parent my kid, but it takes us 40 minutes every day to get shoes on and out the door. And I am tired and I don't know what to do differently. And like, I'm in personal growth field for my job. Like I don't know what to do. And we're talking and I was like, Lacey, so what does that look like when he's putting his shoes on? Like, what are you saying? And she's like, well, he gets mad and I say, I can tell you're frustrated. And then he escalates and he'll walk away. So I follow him. I'm like, well, we are putting our shoes on right now. And I stay really calm. And sometimes he'll throw with the shoes. And I'm like, well, I see that you're mad about this right now. And she said, I feel really guilty because I'm trying to lead with empathy. Yes, friends, that is an important skill. Like we want to attune and empathize with our child. And it's not enough. It's not all of it, because they also need that direction. This is an upstairs brain skill. They need positive discipline. So we worked on her no rules for her family. And she was like, my kid is night and day difference within a month of using that strategy. And she said, I didn't realize, because I've been listening to this podcast, like I'm trying to be gentler and do gentle parenting, because that's the opposite. I wanted to do something different than how I was raised. And gentle parenting didn't take me where I needed to go. And it sucked up all her energy. And she didn't feel good when her 3-year-old was there, because she's always attending to the problems or the emotional state of her 5-year-old. So just to share with you that that's one of the reasons that I like teaching this, because I believe that you have what it takes. Like you can make it better when you have the right combination of tools. And if you have, like, just to relate to you all, I told you that I had my first kiddo 3 years ago. It was August of 2020. And we had planned a home birth with a midwife and a doula. And that was successful after 30 hours of posterior labor. And when my son was born, there were 2 things we didn't know at the time. One was when he was born, I mean, he shrieked. And the midwife's like, wow, that's a really painful cry. And we didn't find out for months, but like kind of to get to the point, he had broken his collarbone when he was born. And we just didn't identify it. Right. So you like put on a onesie on a baby and you're like, pick them up and you nurse them. I know. Right. Right. So this kid cried for 4.5, shrieked. And you look at colic, like the definition of colic is that they cried for 4 to 8 hours a day. I'm like, what about 20 hours? What about that? And I was so lost. My kiddo wasn't nursing well. He dropped from the 86th percentile to the 10th percentile by 2 weeks old. And I was desperate. I'm like the parent, 3 a.m. scrolling on Facebook. I'm not real techie and I'm not real plugged in. Usually I'm like scrolling on Facebook and like trying to figure out like, how do I get this kid fed? And we had a lactation consultant come to our house, and she came to our house because I had broken my ankle at 34 weeks pregnant. So I'm like trapped in bed also, like, what do I do? And so before her 12-hour hospital shift, she had 4 kids with special needs of her own at home. She came into my condo and she sat there, and I'm just in my bathrobe. And she said, I've got all these tricks, and some of these tools, like some of these tricks you're doing right, and some of them you're not doing quite right. And she looks at my crutch, but you can lean on me and I will impart my wisdom and my knowledge until you're confident enough to do it on your own. And the good news in this story, because whenever we hear hard kid stories, it's nice to know, like this is Mason when he was born and Liz working on him and with him, is that he's healthy and thriving now. like we got through that phase and we needed a lactation consultant and we needed some donor milk and we needed I needed a lot of things. I needed an energy healer. Like I was super traumatized too. Some of you know what that experience is like. So if you're somebody who has felt lost or scared or you needed a plan, it's kind of cheesy, but like I feel this in this moment. Like I'm happy to like impart my wisdom. I am happy to guide you through some tools. For those of you who want to stick around for Q&A and learn more about my parenting program that starts on October 25th, you are welcome to do that. If you prefer to get it by email and read it privately, we'll send that out a little bit after the top of the hour here. And I have some more time to share if you have specific questions about your family. Sometimes there's questions about like, what if only one of us is on board? Or what if we've tried these ideas? Or what if my kid has this diagnosis? And what I'm hoping is that you'll have grace with yourself today. So as you know, some of you are going to stay and some of you are going to leave, but like you've possibly learned some new things that connect the dots. And if this is valuable, amazing. Thank you for sharing your time with me on Friday the 13th. And as parents, we're pretty good at the shame spiral and self-blame. So know that no matter how old your kid is, there are tools that can really improve it. And that's my goal with sharing my time here today. So thank you for showing up. It is an honor to teach and share my life's work with you. So for those of you who are leaving, bye. I'll keep the recording on for questions if people are interested. You've got your coupon code of October 13th if 10 of you want to save $100 on the program through my website. But otherwise, what kind of questions do you have? I mean, unmute. Let's have a conversation. Thank you, Kathleen. I appreciate that. All right. Sometimes I see. All right, Carrie has the real question. What if only one parent's on board? Thanks, Jason. So if only one parent is on board, my favorite story is about the duckling and how ducklings imprint. And what did they do on what did they used to do on YouTube? They'd have like all these pictures of the animal that would imprint on a different animal. So you'd see like a duckling following a raccoon or a raccoon nestling up against a giraffe or whatever. Like there's this animalistic thing that happens, and I'll get to your question too, Sheena, where kids are like ducklings. So if you're using some strategies and you're not matching fire with fire and you're avoiding fuel and you know how to do positive discipline so your kid doesn't hit you and you know how to acknowledge their emotions so they feel seen and heard, it's kind of like if you have a friendship group and you're like, this person's rude. I do not get along well with them. Versus like, wow, this person's a really good listener. I feel good when I'm with them. I kind of think about that with parenting, where kids imprint on the techniques of the adult around them. So if your kids ever had an amazing school teacher and you're like, wow, my kid thrived, they probably had a different skill set and personality that was a good match for your kid. And then they go to a teacher and you're like, this is not good. Like this is creating stress. We can only control the things we can control, and we can control ourselves. Is it easier to parent following the same philosophy? Totally. Totally. I don't want to be conveying stuff over to my husband. Like that's annoying. And then I'm already telling him a lot of things to do. And he doesn't want to convey that to me either. So kids are like ducklings. It's worth it if you want to shift the relationship with your kid. And also, if your co-parent can be on board, I say if the two of you can show up to the first two classes, you will each individually recognize what your kid needs and what you're doing to get in the way of what your kid needs. And I'm a believer that as parents, we care about what our kids need. And when we learn what we're doing that's shooting ourselves in the foot, it makes a difference. And so it's still good if one parent is on board. It's kind of like, what if only one parent eats healthy? Like, well, sometimes your kid's going to eat junky and sometimes they're going to eat healthy. It makes it a little harder to eat healthy all the time. I get that. If you're not on the same page, similarly, I was working with a lady internationally, and she said, my husband doesn't believe in limiting screens. And we don't really get tons into screens. We get some into screens in the class, but it's kind of like a next level skill. Like work on the relationship first, screens comes next. And she was saying that they were doing family meetings and rules, and her husband was like rolling his eyes and like, well, I don't care about these. No, it doesn't really matter. And kind of bad mouthing the kid's mom in front of them. And she's like, well, this feels really crappy. So, if there's real like put downs in the relationship, maybe it's not that parent coaching is needed. Maybe some sort of like getting on the same page and treating each other well would be a good practice to work on. I see that happening too. Yeah, Lisa, would you be open to sharing a little bit? Because you wrote, I was more on board than my husband, but you notice he's picking up on new techniques and realizing it works. I don't critique him and I don't throw in comments. So you started working on your relationship with your kid because you had a teenager that was going to go off to college earlier this year. So you're like, will you just comment maybe briefly on that?
So now like everything's not perfect, but I've noticed when it comes to my younger two who have varying diagnoses, I've noticed my husband may not say much. He's more of an authoritarian parent, but I've noticed he's picking up on the different techniques. And I tell him, like, oh, I have a parent class today. And then like a couple days later, I'm like, oh, we talked about this. And notice he doesn't seem like he's listening, but he is. And then he just kind of goes with it. And I don't even think he realizes that he's picking up on some of the techniques. And again, it's not perfect. I don't try to overcorrect him. I don't try to make him feel like his parenting is less than what I'm doing. And I've just noticed he kind of picks up on it right with the flow. And again, it's not perfect. He still does his thing, but
Yeah.
it's the kids less confusing on what's going on, but we both bring different things to the table when it comes to our difference in parenting.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, and I feel like that could be a good transition to talk about what does the program look like? Because Lisa, you went through the program earlier this year, and I'm hoping that's okay. I just said that. Thank you. We've said it on other calls before. So the way that the program works, in case this is helpful for those of you who want to see it, I'll send this email. I'm just on my parenting website. So I have a DIY version where you can sign up for the 8 tools and you can learn them at your own pace. And it's education and some reflection activities. But what I'm launching on October 25th and have those 10 seats that are discounted is option 2, which is the Mad to Glad Blueprint Plus. So basically what happens and what Lisa knows about is that you get all of my DIY modules so that you have forever access to them. You can repeat them based on your kid's age and your stage and getting it more habitual. But you also, so you get all those modules, but you get a seat in my live 8-week cohort. So what this is we meet once a week. We're scheduled for Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Central. It's 75 minutes and everything's recorded because there's no good time for all of us to gather as parents. So you can be really successful if you say, well, I'm available at Thursdays at noon. Great. Watch the replay at noon with your co-parent and then do the actual reflection activities. Because what you'll do is you'll get the tool and then you'll be taken through a process of how exactly to implement it at home, given your kid. Like it's very highly structured for you to get some step-by-step guidance. And then if you're on the live call, you get customized parent coaching and troubleshooting. So you get the DIY program, you get a seat in the 8-week live cohort, including a 50-page workbook with detailed notes on every concept. So you don't have to take that many pages of notes. And it's paired with 6 months of membership in my parent coaching community. So, like Lisa had this peak experience earlier this year of the 8-week cohort. And then what we've done for the last, handful of months is I do parent coaching community calls to talk about anything. So anybody who's been in my program, these are hosted on Fridays, sometimes in the morning at 9 a.m. to catch certain time zones, sometimes at 2 p.m. to catch time zones, and before your kids are home from school. So that's a way to also learn the material and implement it with this coaching support, because 15 minutes on a call can make a huge difference for learning how to implement the tool, and you can layer it in a way. Because when you get the tools in a certain order, fire in the brain starts calming, relationship builds trust and connection, and now they can do things like get out the door and follow a routine and do positive discipline, because those are upstairs brain skills. So we make sure that those downstairs skills are really solid. So if you wanted to read that curriculum of the 8, tools. Those are on my website. And you're welcome to schedule a one-on-one call if you feel like you wanted to talk about that before signing up. I have a few slots open, maybe 5 in the next 10 days before the class starts. You can get that through my website to set up a complimentary 30-minute call. I'm going to get nosy and ask about your family because I care, like if this is the right match versus maybe you need something different like occupational therapy, and I can sometimes read between the lines and direct you in the best direction where you might need to go for your family. Yeah, or you can register through the website too. Other questions you might have? I always appreciate when there's 10, 15 people staying longer, especially in parenting. We've got a lot going on, but anything else, friends? Or a takeaway? Any takeaway you want to share with us today? And then I'll wrap us up.
Can I say, with already gone through the course once, I am really contemplating on doing it a second time, just as a keep it fresh in my brain because I'm a slow processor. It was super, super helpful, especially with my 10-year-old who has ASD, to really implement ways that would work. So I started in May, and by school starting at the end of August, he set his own routine. He found something that worked. He's less combative in the morning, and there's just so many useful tools that were really beneficial for my family. Even with my 18-year-old who we were having conflict with, is in college now, and seems like our relationship is better. And the class overall for us was just helpful. And again, my husband picked up on different techniques, and it's not perfect, but we're more cohesive together.
Thank you, Lisa. And that's the point of it. I offer the cohort only a couple times a year. October is a good time of year because the end of the year holidays are different. Like you have so many tools in place that by the time your kids are at home for 2 or 3 weeks with you, if you go on my blog or my YouTube channel, you'll see families like, oh my gosh, I'm looking forward to the holidays, which is always a great testament. And then, yeah, next year, I haven't chosen what date I'm going to do, but October is one of my favorite times to do it. As far as the cost of the course, thank you. Yeah, that seems important to share. It's on my website, but the 6-month program is $1,850. So it includes the $500 DIY modules as a gift. You get a spot in the 8-week series. You get 6 months of parent coaching membership. And I have a few, Facebook group with certified Magic Lad mentor coaches, so that if you have a question popping up throughout the week, we're active in there. People are on it. And there's payment plans. Some people like HSA and flex spending covers parent coaching. You used to need a doctor's note. Now you don't need that. And some grants and waivers. So I know CADDY waivers cover, I know there are some children's mental health county grants that can cover if your child has one of those. Yeah. Okay, let me look at your questions here. Oh, Karine, listening from Guatemala. Thank you. Yeah, we have For those of you who are professionals, we've got our certification program coming up to learn how to teach the course wherever you live. That reminded me of my Puerto Rico registrant. We're getting started with that too, if you wanted to look at that. Kelsey, no worries. I got you. And if you have grant or waiver funding, schedule a one-on-one with me, because I'm going to collect some of your family information, and then I can write a letter in support of funding. All right. I see this question. Sonia, I hope that answers your question. Yeah. How to best match a fast processing mom with a slower processing 18-year-old son. Yeah, I mean, some of these brain tools, we slow it down because of mirror neurons. So we slow it down so that there's not triggering so much like, I got to catch up. I'm always behind. My mom's like really fast. So it's learning some of those new habits and how you interact. And then Sheena, let me check yours out. You're welcome. I'm glad it was informative. Oh, you've got a nursing picture. I like it. Okay, thank you. Great. You're considering joining on the 25th. However, you'd like to see if it would work. As you suspect your 5-year-old, do you want to talk for a second here? You could unmute. May have ADHD, but not assessed yet. What's the best thing to do? So yeah, feel free to unmute. We don't actually need a diagnosis. I no longer work with diagnoses in the coaching field. I really prefer to work with families who can self-identify, like, we've got this intensity at home. There's fire, if you or your kid has fire. And if your goals are some tools to create more calm and positive connection, then it's a good match. My background is in lots of areas in my studies. It's ADHD, autism, trauma-informed, sensory processing disorder, mental illness, personal growth, mindfulness, positive psychology. So like, I know that's kind of like a big list of things, but maybe that answers some of your question. I see you unmuted. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, no, my daughter's been having problems through school, so we've been called several times. She keeps getting behavior points and stuff, and a lot of it is she can't regulate her emotions. We've tried doing the whole stay calm process at home, even though sometimes it's failed and we have lost it and shouted when we shouldn't have and felt guilty over it. But the problem is that I don't think school is on the same page as we are. So they've said it in so many words sometimes that, oh, I think you've got a naughty daughter. And it's quite harsh to hear that someone's labeling a 5-year-old as naughty without realizing there could be underlying issues. So we have seen the psychologists and stuff, but I don't know which is the best way, whether she needs more help through occupational therapist or anyone, or if us just coaching by learning the techniques is good enough.
Yeah.
Because she's getting labeled, she's getting a reputation through school, she's not getting support through teachers. It's a bit of a grey area, and she's only 5, bless her. So,
Oh, bless her indeed. And you, thank you for spending time with me today. I'm in the same boat as you. When kids are labeled as naughty, my heart breaks because I just think about, under the age of 7, that language and how we speak over children can really influence their identity and their self-talk. So with her young age, I feel like it's really worth you doing some parent coaching, because what you're going to find is you're going to find the tools that help regulate her emotions from like an adult child perspective, a parent child, and then you'll have the tools to pass on to school. There's a mom who just joined my program, and she has 3 kids, and they have her 7-year-old boy suspected ADHD, and he's having a hard time in a private Catholic school. And one of the things about that school that she's found out by me giving her some questions to ask is that they don't have special education background, and they have like but you need to obey because that's some of the values of why you're bringing your kid here. We're teaching them obedience. And I'm like, but the kid's going to obey more if they can run around for a little bit first, instead of sitting in a desk and like having to focus, because focus is upstairs brain skills, and ADHD and impulsivity and high energy is downstairs brain skills. So if you can work with his body, he'll be more successful. So I say all that because a lot of families with intense brain kids need a 2 or 3 prong or 4 prong approach. Parenting support is always going to help you. Something for your kid is going to help them. I'm a big fan of things that regulate the nervous system. I've already mentioned OT and pediatric neurological chiropractic. Some families really need a nutritional approach because their kid has some food sensitivities. And then, not to disregard that, sometimes it's some sort of therapeutic approach is necessary as well. So I think at young ages, I think at any age it's worth it. And because you have some interest and because you have the heart for your child succeeding, there's a lot you can do with parenting tools. And when you see the 3 or 4 that definitely work for her to have better self-control at home, you now get to communicate that to her school team, and you'll feel empowered. Like, is this a my child needs help problem, or is this a my child needs a different setting problem?
fine.
And like, you hear my fierce mama bear, right?
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay. No problem. You can catch it on the replay. So catch that about grants on the replay I get with your kids being all over you. If your kid has some sort of funding, schedule a one-on-one call with me. There's a link to that in the email that I sent you 10 minutes ago because I pre-programmed it. And I'll gather some family information and write a letter, and you can submit that to a funding source if that's relevant for your family. And everybody remember that coupon code, because I just created it today. October 13 will save you $100, either on the payment plan or the pay in full, if you're one of the first 10. So I will look forward to seeing some of you on October 25th. For others, feel free to look at some Google reviews and my blog and see if there are some more tools and information that helps you get a sense of how we work together. I feature family stories a lot because we have gentle parents in the group. We have high energy sales dads in the group who need to learn to maybe calm their energy to match their kids' sensitivity sometimes. There's a lot of overwhelmed and frazzled parents, but mostly it's a culture of parents who care and need a space of non-judgment, because when we have that space for us, we're able to really support our kids. And I appreciate how cutting edge parent coaching is. So thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see some of you on the other side when we kick off on Wednesday, the 25th. Take good care. Bye.